it's hard to do this when we've got some people in the Skokie Valley, I think, over there. This is a fantastic restaurant when you're coming in for dinner and having a nice time. You're not in a gigantic room with a lot of people all over the place. But here it's a very intimate place. But today, well, it's very intimate, just like the radio show. We broadcast to thousands of people every Saturday, mostly one or two at a time. We're going to have a real nice time this afternoon. I hope that you're getting settled and you'll have a nice meal. And from time to time, we're going to jump in, maybe from this room or the next room or the following room, and say hello to everybody. And as the occasion warrants, Ken and I are going to get up and stop at every table, and we'll be followed by our official Rose of the Day photographer, Don Pointer, and his lovely wife,
Nora.
See, I always, at the station, Ken and I have a little sign on the desk where we work in front of the microphones that says WDCB 90.9 FM. Because if we didn't have that there, sure as shooting, one of us would say WNIB.
Oh, yeah.
Ken might even say WAIT, and I would say WLTD. So we always have this little extra sign there to keep us from going off the wrong track, and sometimes we don't even read that right. But you're being entertained today throughout the afternoon by the West End Jazz Band, and they're over here. And I need to tell you that they are providing our kind of music, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to let them play again a little bit. We'll have some food, and then we'll be back and talk to you a little later. Thanks so much.
I really enjoy it, and it obviously shows. Ken, I want to say it's been a pleasure to work with you all these years, and just a gentleman, a scholar, just a wonderful person, all-around good guy. Thank you very much.
Don't worry, folks. Everybody's not going to come. Now you're talking. Let's hear it for the West End Jazz Band. We've got a few folks who have a few things to say, and then you're going to hear from the man of the hour himself, Ken Alexander. He's the man of it. Is he here? You know, he does that all the time during the broadcast.
Studio B.
Studio B, we call it. We call it Studio B. Well, I can't do this until Ken gets here. Best laid plans. No, that's okay. That's okay. What are the fanfare? You know, earlier this year, and I was telling this to this table over here before, I was very much involved in planning the 39th anniversary show for Those Were the Days, coming up at the 1st of May. And thinking so much, 39 years. And one afternoon, Ken Alexander said to me, he said, he says, I'm going to be on radio for 50 years in the spring. Just like that, he says it, with no fanfare at all. And I said, 50 years? I'm knocking myself out for 39 years, just like that for 50 years? And he said, yeah. Oh, it was nice. He said, I said, well, what was the date? He said, I don't know. It was March or April of 1959. Now, I'm working on some programming and thinking March or April, and the only date that I happen to have open on the schedule for the, this is the winter edition of Those Were the Days, the January, February, March stuff. And then I was working on the next one, so I said, well, how about, gee, wouldn't it be funny if we could do this on April 1st? April the, what was yesterday? The
4th.
Right? 4th. See, I don't know. That's why I'm going out. But on April the 4th, I said, well, let's designate that as Ken Alexander's 50th anniversary, and I'd like to do a whole show about you. And Ken said, a whole show? He said, well, of course you'd play, regular programs like, Jack Benny and Fred Allen and the Suspense and so forth. And I said, no. it'll be a whole show about Ken Alexander. I said, we'll dig and find clips from our program, from other programs you've done, other broadcasts and things that you've done. He said, well, nobody's going to want to listen to that. He says, nobody's going to tune in. I said, why not? He said, well, it's only me. I mean, it's all... I said, Ken, you have absolutely no idea of the regard in which you are held by our listening audience. And he got that glazed look over his face. I don't believe that. And I said, so I'd like, he kept being skeptical about that. But he agreed, which was a surprise to all of us who were involved with the show. We were surprised that he would agree to let us do something like that. But he did. And then a little later, I said, we've got to mark this with something more than just the broadcast, which I think will be nice. How would you feel about that? Suppose I call Don Roth's Blackhawk up and find out if they've got the next day, the 5th, I got that right. And we could have a dinner for you there. Well, who would want to come to the dinner? Ken? This is who wanted to come to that dinner. So he was kind of blasé about all of this stuff until about a month or so ago, when he realized that the last, not yesterday, but the 2 preceding Saturdays would be Pledge Week Saturdays, and those were the days. And I said, well, that's all right, the pledge period will be over by that time. I think the last day of the pledge period was the Friday before yesterday. But there's always a threat being held over us at the station. Scott Wager knows what I'm talking about. And if we don't meet a goal or get really close to the goal, we're going to have to extend this pledge period an extra day or 2 or 3 maybe. So now Ken is getting very nervous that the program on which he's going to be featured was going to be interrupted by asking people to call in for money. And I said, well, if we have to do that, I'll talk to the people, that the powers that be at DCB, and maybe a third of that money can go to you directly. He kind of liked that idea a little bit, but he was still worried about it. And he didn't know, and I said, Friday afternoon I talked with him, and I said, well, I haven't gotten any kind of an email that says that they're going to extend the pledge period. So they probably got real close or have made their goal. And he was relieved, and even when he walked into the studio Saturday morning, he said, still no message? No, nothing. I said, no at all. And as a matter of fact, I might tell you, the last pledge period exceeded every preceding pledge period in the history of WDC. We thank you so much for supporting it through our Those Were the Days program. And that's why George Littlefield and Ken Alexander made up those jingles, and that's why we pitch all of that sort of thing in and amongst our regular programming. We're not public television. We don't bring you the stuff you want to hear just when we're asking for money. We keep doing what you want to hear while we're asking for the money, so you know what you're giving to. And that's the great thing about WDCB. Here we are, and now this is the moment of truth for you. I'm going to ask you to speak in a little bit, and speak a little in a little bit. But I need to say that it has been a distinct privilege and a pleasure for me to be working with Ken Alexander for all these years. He's been a great sidekick. He's been a great friend. He's been a creative person par excellence. And if you were listening to any portion of our program yesterday afternoon, you know what I'm talking about. He just has contributed so much to our broadcasts over the years, and so much to my life. I mean, without Ken Alexander, I would have a very difficult time getting away for any kind of a vacation. And Ken has never missed a day since that first Saturday in February of 2001, when he came on as a regular permanent member of our staff on Those Were the Days. He's never missed a day. I, on the other hand, but thanks to Ken, we've been able to do that. Now, you met some of our technical staff before, as I introduced them, traveling from room to room here before. But there is one person who's not with us today, and was an integral part of our Those Were the Days family for many years. His name is Len Kunken, and Len has contacted ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, and he's in tough shape, but he's valiant, and he goes on, and he called me and left a message on my answering machine yesterday and said, Chuck, my wife is emailing you a message that I'd like you to read to Ken at the dinner tomorrow. And in fact, he left the message on the business line and then also on the personal line to make sure that I got it. And we went to the email and found this message, Ken. Mr. Alexander, the years we worked together, you taught me a lot about professionalism pertaining to radio work and to life. I knew from the start that I was working with a true professional. In fact, if you look up professionalism in the dictionary, there's actually a picture of Ken Alexander. One of my fondest memories of you at WNIB was reading the news during the breaks. Whether the stories were to do with politics or the Gulf War, your inflection conveyed the story straight, to the point, and without any editorializing. I still hear the same style today when you read a story from World War II during your yesterday's newspaper segments on Those Were the Days. It was my good fortune that my days in radio were greatly enhanced by working with you. Congratulations. Between the two of us, we blubber like you can't believe. Have a seat. Have a seat. No, have a seat. Everybody's got their cross to bear. I've got two. When Ken was at WNIB, he worked with two fellow announcers who are out here today, and we surprised him with their presence this afternoon. I'd like you to meet the man who actually was a staff announcer at WNIB for many years, and who now is the first voice you hear at the very top of our Those Were the Days program. He says, it's 1 o'clock, and Those Were the Days with Chuck Schaden is next. Miller Peters.
I've actually never used one of these. Does it work?
It's called a microphone.
Is that what it's called? Okay. The time is... Hey, it's 3 o'clock. We're 2 hours into Chuck Schaden's program. I just have a few little things to say about Ken, because there's a lot of things to say about Ken. And I thought, maybe, in my own perverse way, Ken, after everybody would say everything what they like about you, I'd say what I don't like about you. But I had a little, malice of forethought, because if I say that, then I have nothing to say. Because what's not to like about Ken? I don't know how long we've known each other, because I know you worked at Musicraft. I lived fairly around the corner at that time. Maybe I met you then. Yeah, I bought things from Musicraft. Actually, not too long ago, I gave a speaker to Jim Zaremski that came from Musicraft. A long time ago. I know that in 1986, you came to work sort of part-time at NIB. But I'm not sure how much we ran into each other, because I had a regular shift.
Yeah.
But we, saw each other. Of course, we had something in common from the very beginning. We both did taping for NIB in the very early days. I at Riverside Plaza, and up in the sauna. You remember the sauna? Oh, you never at the sauna in 25 East Chestnut? No, that was a wonderful thing. It was nice to have paneling, but when you realize what really was, it was something else. But then in '96, when you came for 2 days, a week, then we really got to know each other. And I don't know, it was just a thing about you. I mean, you felt like you always knew you. And I have to tell you something. I named Ken Sir Kenneth of Alexander. It was, I don't know why. It was just, you know, he's just not a knight in shining armor. He's just a gentleman. He's fun, witty, smart beyond belief. And the other thing was, when I walked into control room, I never knew who was going to greet me. Because Ken is wonderful with voices. But the one I loved was Sidney Greenstreet. I can't do anything like that. I wish I could do Peter Lorre. I love Peter Lorre. But Sidney Greenstreet, you know what I'm talking about too. And, but there's just so many memories, so many wonderful things with Ken. But Ken, I want to tell you a little story, and this, you'll have to excuse me. This is sort of like nostalgia between Ken and me. But you may remember, when I first started at NIB on the west side, in their west side, in 83. No, I'm sorry, later, in 84 actually, when they moved there. There was a little store at the corner of May and Erie. It looked like a little candy store. But I noticed that people played cards in the back. And gradually that apparently turned into some sort of store for, well, let's put it, some old Italians. Because it was an old Italian neighborhood. And down at Racine and Grand, there was an old rusty sign that said, the Nitty Drugstore.
Oh, my.
And I never asked because I was too scared to ask.
What's all this got to do with me?
You want to know what's it got to do with you? Maybe your name is not Alexander, you know? Because Ken and I, after he started there, we would walk down to Grand and May and catch a cab back. And I let him off at the
Ogilvy Transit.
well, I still call it Northwest. And but you remember the people that would sit out there? That, you know, they're out there. Sometimes they'd sit out in the summertime after they played cards and discuss how much they lost and all that sort of stuff. And they'd even help us watch for cabs. I remember sometimes they'd say, "Here comes a cab," you know. But I wanted to tell you that I passed by there several months ago. Well, maybe more than that. They'd fixed it up. They put a sign up in the window. They called it Goodfellas.
Oh.
And I thought, that is not going to last too long. It is an old Italian neighborhood. In fact, remember Bill? You remember Bill, sorry. Told me that one time he went to a bar over there and they were fixing it up. And the owner said, well, you know, and this is an old Italian neighborhood. We never call the police when something happens. We take care of it ourselves. Well, the last time I saw that place, Ken, it's closed. There's a for rent sign there. And, you know, it's just sort of like coming around, circle, you know, the more things change, the more they remain the same. Mm-hmm. But you go on. And that is the wonderful thing about it. And I want to read something that you wrote. Yes. How much longer will I continue to work in radio? Who knows? But I will share this thought with you. I feel sure that when I do finally quit, I will quit because I have to, not because I want to. And that is a wonderful thing. I'd like to say to the next 50 years. But let's just say to how many years you want.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Lord Peters. When Ken was, part of the time that Ken was at WNIB, the morning man at the station and the man who closed out the mornings when WNIB was sold was Obi Yeager. And many of you may have remembered listening to Obi Yeager. Obi couldn't be with us today. No, he's here is Obi Yeager.
Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me? I too have to learn how to use one of these things. I was one of the last of the announcers at WNIB. If I remember, I came in '97, and I was there until the last day, until the station went for stunt. And that was the end of that. And through the years, I wrote about it in one of my books, in a way without mentioning names and so on. The station was really colorful, and I'm sure a lot of you realize that. You have no idea how colorful it was for those who worked at the station. And we had all the animals, and we had a couple of people who were like animals. And we had, of course, a string of absolutely wonderful and really purely talented people. Miller, of course, had a lot of talent, and just really a great guy. And the late Fred Heff, who had a lot of talent, and he would frequently walk into the studio very angry and slap his stuff, his packages on the counter and swear at something. I have no idea what that was all about, but he used to do that a lot. And then, of course, we had Al Hudgens, who did the jazz show overnight. So, I mean, really just a wonderful guy. And yeah, Mr. A, that's right, Mr. A. And a whole bunch of really great guys. And then there was Ken Alexander. Now Ken, I had never known Ken before starting at WNIB because I lived in San Francisco and I was gone. Chicago, in a way, is my home. And the thing about him, and that's a lot has been said about Ken. Quite a bit has been said about Ken. I still remember him taking over the show when Miller was ill or he was out catting around or and then Ken would sub for him, and then Ken would walk into the studio and go, okay, now what am I doing? What am I doing?
A lot of people have a large high regard for Ken Alexander. And I know all of the fans out there in Radio Land who listen to our program, who've listened to Ken on WNIB and also on WAIT. And if there's anybody still alive who listened to you on ELPH, we'll have to go over to the cemetery.
They're voting this
But
week.
anyway,
Yeah.
representing all of the fans who listen to Ken Alexander on the radio over the years, is a man who's a longtime friend of Those Were the Days and our radio program, and of Ken Alexander's and mine. His name is Jim Melka, and he always turns up when you need him. And Jim is here today. He wouldn't miss an event like this. He hardly misses any of our special events. And Jim is here today, and I'd like you to welcome Jim Melka, who has something to give to Ken.
Ken, I don't know if Ken remembers it or not, but a long time ago I used to spend most of my time delivering newspapers. And I'm really not prepared to say anything other than the fact that he's been my neighbor for a long time. Long ago, not anymore, but he was so kind. At one time, I used to make a Christmas tape. And he took out time to just be part of it and to do some readings on it. A man who's a professional, to come to somebody's house and to talk into just a little, tape recorder for just the family. He's that sensitive. He's that good of a guy. But I wanted to deliver him. This is the Herald Examiner from July 5th, 1937. He loaned it to me a while ago. I know it's...
Don't motivate me.
Bring it down slowly.
Well, have you heard
today, Ken Alexander.
Please be seated. This won't take long. I was going to say about 6 or 7 minutes. First of all, I was telling Chuck, I don't know, people will be eating and murmuring and so forth, and it's so quiet you can hear a pin drop. It's wonderful. You guys are wonderful. Anyway, I want to say, first of all, I have a lot of people to thank. One of whom is Chuck Schaden. He's a man that we all respect professionally, and as a man, everybody who's worked with him, we all respect him greatly. He's not a man without flaw. It's not an egregious flaw, but it's a flaw. He does at times tend to exaggerate, as you just heard. But we'll forgive him that. In fact, all these people have been talking about me exaggerating. I don't consider myself a professional at all, but it's nice of them to say that. I have essentially, I want to thank a few people here this afternoon. I want to thank you for coming, of course. And I apologize, I was planning, and Chuck wanted me to circulate in all 4 rooms and greet everybody. I made it to 2 rooms. I think 10 minutes per table, but it ran out, and I did only 2 rooms. I didn't do this room and one of the other rooms. I apologize for that. Although I did greet a lot of people when you came in. But I thank you all for coming. I want to thank Chuck for arranging this lovely dinner at Don Roth's Blackhawk. And I want to thank him for the program he presented yesterday. He did a lot of work putting that together. I had no idea what he had planned, but things I'd forgotten about. And there it was. I enjoyed listening to it myself. I want to thank him, too, for allowing me to work with him in years, 34 years, since 1975. And I want to thank Steve Darnall in advance for taking over Chuck's seat on Those Were the Days when he does, 13 weeks from yesterday, July 4th. I talked Steve into letting me continue as his, we have a term for it in radio. It's called announcer/stooge. Steve is letting me work with him in the next, for a while. And let's see, I have these notes here. I hope that Steve and I will be able to work together for 34 years, too. Now, that's an unrealistic expectation. No, put this. I hope that Steve and I will be able to work together till he retires. Yeah. Briefly, I'd like to thank the station owners I worked for. The first was Buddy Black, the late Buddy Black, back in 1959, the Edgewater Beach Hotel. He owned that little station, 93.9 FM, where WLIT is today. He hired me there to work for him without any, I was a volunteer. I worked Sundays without any pay, and I was glad to do it at first. And then later he started paying me $2 an hour, and later increased that to $2.25 an hour. But, just volunteer. I was learning about radio. It was wonderful working there. And I worked there for a couple of years, and then one day when I got off the air at 6 o'clock, I got a phone call from a man named Bill Florian. I had never heard of him, but he was with WNIB. That was a nice little classical music station, a nice station, and he asked me if I'd be interested in working for him. And I certainly would. He said, we don't have any openings right now, but you never know in this business, so keep in touch. So I would keep in touch. I call him every couple of months. And no, nothing but keep in. But anyway, I did finally, they hired me to work at WNIB, and then I continued on ELPH for a while, and that at the store where I was working full time. And then I had to leave WEBH because it was too much. It was too much to do. And then finally, well, I don't want to drag this on too long, but I finally, I lost my job at that music rack store, so I had to get a full-time job somewhere. I didn't know where, but I thought I'd like to get a job in radio. Anyway, I was hired at WAIT, and I stayed there for 21 years. Now, that was owned by the principal owner, a man named Maurice Rosenfield, and he's passed away now, but I'm indebted to him for hiring me and keeping me on the payroll. And then after I got tired of, there was change in ownership and all that, and and I finally left in '86. And Bill, Florian, and Sonia Atseff, who now are Mr. and Mrs., and still are Mr. and Mrs., invited me to come back to WNIB on a part-time basis, and I was happy to do that. I stayed with them from '86 until the station was sold in 2001. And then at that time, Chuck, with whom I've been working, when he was off for some reason, I'd take over for him, and I'd do little things for the show, asked me to work for him every Saturday, work with him every Saturday. I still don't know whether he did it because he really wanted me, or whether he just thought, well, I needed the money. I don't know. But I agreed to work with them. I've been doing it ever since, and I appreciate that. Let me see now. What else? I want to say here. Oh, there's one more person I want to thank, too. One person to whom I owe so very much. Somebody that, without whom I would never have had a career in radio at all. You. Yes, you, the listener. You don't maybe realize what you mean, but I'd like to explain. You probably know a little about radio, the business aspects of radio. If there are enough listeners to a radio station, the station will prosper, sell advertising to all sorts of clients and make a lot of money. But if the listener base erodes, not that many listeners, advertisers have ways of finding out about that. There are surveys, and they'll switch to another station or maybe to another medium altogether. Then the station is in trouble. They will maybe fine-tune the format a little bit. Maybe they will throw out the format and try something entirely different brand of rock and roll, or different whatever they're doing. In either case, it's quite likely that a lot of the air staff, or maybe the whole air staff, will be fired. Well, that's never happened to me, and I think I know why. It has nothing to do with my performance at all. It's because I've always had the good fortune to work for stations with high-quality programming. And you folks seem to prefer stations with high-quality